Hey everyone, this is episode 10 of the Morey Miles podcast. I couldn't be more excited to have our guest on for this podcast. This is Josh Stangby. He was my roommate in college, somebody that is very, very special, very dear to my heart, somebody that actually went and was able to make it to the NFL. And that was really the main reason we wanted to be able to talk. And one of the most athletic, just skilled guys. I mean, the best football player I've ever been around, great work ethic, just a ton of respect for him, and actually went and had a very difficult way of getting to the NFL and be able to potentially give people that are watching this or listening to this the opportunity to learn from his mistakes and make it so hopefully your road can be easier. We actually filmed this a while ago, and I was just going through, re-listening to it, and it is just a great podcast. I'm so excited for you guys to be able to listen to it. Like, subscribe. Looking forward to being able to hear from you, give us some comments, and enjoy the podcast.
Hey guys, this is Josh Stangby, born and raised in Los Angeles, California. So I grew up actually learning how to play football with my brother at like around the age of 6 or 7. My brother picked up learning how to play football from a Bill Walsh football book. And ultimately, like every day, we always went outside and we were playing something. Baseball, basketball, football. But football was always just a thing that I loved to do ever since I started watching the game. And I remember watching the 97 Super Bowl and watching Elway jump and spin around and sacrifice his all for his team. So ultimately, I kept playing the game. And then when I got into high school, it was the first time that I ever played tackle football. Now, prior to that, I played flag football, I played basketball, baseball. I had a lot of sports that I loved, but there's just something different about the physicality of the game. And then also like just the team aspect of people like coming and working together and everybody having a specific role that contributes to this win. And ultimately, you can never care about somebody else's role, and it's your ability to perform the best that you can in your role and just dominate the other person in front of you. So that portion of the game was amazing. And the one thing I loved doing more than anything else was just scoring touchdowns. So at the end of the day, like winning football games is about scoring more points than your opponent. And I always found that that was something that gave me excitement. To score a touchdown is like you go to the opposing opponent and you just give them a big and say like, we're just better than you guys. Ultimately, I knew I wanted to play college football from high school, but I was super undersized. I graduated at like 5'6", 148. I was super small. I grew up going to like this youth football academy by a mentor of mine named Eli Swinton. He was a big mentor and impact in my high school career. He got me and pushed me to really want to play football on a collegiate level and prepared me on a goal-setting mentality on you have to set these goals and accomplish them. So immediately after high school, even though I had 0 offers, I was super slow, ran like 4.78, 4.8 in the 40, undersized. Like I knew I wanted to play college ball. And I remember in high school, like a couple of the coaches used to tell me, like, you're never going to catch a football in college. You're never going to, I played running back. You're never going to have a carry in college football. Like you should just like, try. You got to find a degree. You got to find a career path. And I do believe that they're right in some standard. Like, I'm glad they said that, but that was that competitive fire because I always took stuff like that very personally. Somebody who says that you can't do this when I have in my heart that I know that I can, that's just that, like, that's all I need to really push myself. So I knew from then, I'm like, yeah, that you're definitely wrong. And I'm going to show you. So I went to college my first year in JUCO. 5'6", 148. I played at Glendale Community College. And I just remember like I wasn't prepared as an athlete going into the college level from a physicality standpoint. Mentally, I had the competitive edge. However, there is a physical preparation to the game that an athlete needs to have. Didn't perform very well. Still was like all conference as a returner. And then I transferred to Valley College, blossomed from there because I pushed myself like really, really hard. I worked a lot with my brother, who's like a huge mentor to me, my best friend. And he pushed me very, very hard to be the best football player that I could be. But ended up being, I think I was second team All-State at LA Valley that year and probably played the best football I've ever played in my life. And from at that point, playing Valley college football, like I knew I was like, all right, I want to play this thing professionally because I had that final point. It was like an aha moment where like, that's the first time I ever really worked for something, set a goal and accomplished it. And I knew like that feeling Like I just wanted to feel that over and over again. And I was willing to train as hard as I could in order to get there. So I transferred from there. I went through like a long academic collegiate battle to get into a university. And I was actually persuaded by you, man, to want to go to Ottawa University. And it was the greatest thing that ever happened to me because I played football with like my brothers, like people who I to this day like are still really good friends with. I've been in my wedding and I've shared memories with. I met the best football player I've ever played with is Luke Lundy. The dude was 6'2", 6'1", 250, 245, and he was just like, imagine you have Mike Allstott's like running power, but like Emmitt Smith's footwork. Like the dude could just do it all. He could catch, block, run. Just an amazing athlete. And I was just getting scouted by the fact that these guys were there. And I always had that goal. I remember writing it down every day of like, I'm going to sign with the NFL team in 2015 for this amount of money. And I wrote it down and I stayed committed to it. Morey, you and I trained like dogs. We pushed ourselves. And ultimately, I ended up signing with the Atlanta Falcons at 2015. And then signed after that with the Indianapolis Colts. I played practice squad there. What kind of got me there was when I stepped on the field, I always had this feeling like I was the best player out there. And I always played with there's no fear. I never was scared of an opponent. I never worried about what their strengths and weaknesses were because I always had a way to exploit that. And at the end of the day, football for me is about like it's just you against somebody else and like who wants it more. And that was kind of a mentality I always took with me. And I just always strongly felt that there was nobody out there that wanted that more than me. And there's nobody that would be willing to run through some stuff like how I would. So that's what got me there. Played 3 years in Canada after that. And it's just the greatest journey I've been on through my athletic career. And I'm just super thankful. I'm really lucky. So that's my story in a nutshell.
There you go. I love it. So many good things to be able to kick off from there and be able to dive deeper into. So the first thing that I want to go and ask you is, when did you first realize like I'm like this is a special thing, like I'm capable of being a NFL athlete, NFL receiver, or even a great college athlete? Like when did you decide, or when did you make that realization like I am different when it comes to my athletic ability?
It was my sophomore year in college at Los Angeles Valley College. I remember sitting in with Fenwick, and that was my coach, Jim Fenwick. He's the greatest coach I've ever had, great mentor too. He sat me down. He said, look, like if you want to play professional football, he's like, you got to do this, this, and this. And that got me thinking. I'm like, wait, he's talking about me playing pro ball. Like I want to do it, but this is the first time that I've heard somebody mention that to me. And he's like, well, do you want to play pro ball right now? I said, yeah, but I know I have holes in my game that I need to fill. Like I would love to play pro ball. I think I could play it now. Yeah, but I'm 160 and I probably don't run a fast enough time. And I had all these things. And he's like, okay, this is what you need to do in order to get there. And then from there, it's like, okay, like whatever I got to do is what I got to do. But that moment at my sophomore year was like, I'm going to be a pro ball player. And there was nothing that was going to stop me.
I know. I wish that, and I tell people this all the time, and with you, I feel like it's just so relevant in so many ways, but I wish I knew back then what I know now in terms of speed training and development and things like that, because I just know that you would have been able to really excel in so many other ways. And even me personally, if I would have trained better, I feel like we worked so freaking hard to just squat a little bit more, deadlift a little, and didn't really end up putting a ton into what are the numbers behind our speed and our agility and our acceleration and the force in the ground and all the different parts of, I think that I spend a lot of time on working now and being able to help athletes be able to achieve. So I deal with athletes all the time that are not near as athletic as you, right? That are not near as gifted as you. And they still have, I think, this false persona or this false idea of the importance of the education, right? And the schools and study and grades and things like that. And I know there's a period in your life where that was something that I know held you back. And so maybe going a little bit into how that happened, why that happened, how did you change, how did you turn everything back around, or how to not fall into that trap?
Oh man, dude, I love that question, and for sure we can talk about that. Man, I never put my education and my development of my mind first. And that was my biggest mistake I ever made, was that I thought that I could cheat the system and I could just play my way into being a pro athlete. Well, no, there's a preparation aside to that mentally, even in the professional football world, to where you need to have a cognitive development in a way that you study, a way that you prepare, a way that you carry yourself as a mentally well-developed person, somebody who is cognitively aware enough to study and accomplish tasks and do what is asked of you. And going into college football, I never even went to class, man. I didn't take my school seriously. And at the time, I was getting recruited by like UCLA, Washington, Pac-10, whatever schools, you name it. And I
That was for
remember
football and track, right? Or was that just for football?
Well, it was track. I was getting recruited by Oregon, so like I was. This was just at Valley, and I just want to walk into that story first because my GPA was horrible, man. And I remember Washington State coming in, and they flew in to talk with me, and it was just like they asked for my transcripts, and I shook the hand. I thought, oh man, I'm about to go to Washington State, and then dude's like, I wish that you were as good at school as you were at football, and then walked out of the room. Conversation over. And then from there, still wasn't a good enough low point for me. I continued to not do well in school. And then
I would have probably started crying.
I went home and cried, dude. I did. I went home and cried, man. And I remember Fenwick sat me in his office and said, look, man, he's like, one day, 10 years from now, I'm going to see you on the street. I don't want to look at you and say, that guy could have been something. He could have been the best football player that like I've seen. He's like, I don't want to say that, but you're heading down that road. And like, I didn't say one word because Fenwick was like a father to me. So him saying that, you can just sense the disappointment, but also the expectation that he set for me in his mind. And I wasn't able to live up to those standards. So it hit me deeply. And that, along with, I struggled with a lot of family stuff and my dad going through a lot of sickness. I just never took and prioritized my education. So as a result, I got disenrolled from college and had to fight my way back. And basically they dropped me out of college because I was so bad at school. They took me out, man. And I had to fight my way back by basically enrolling back into another junior college and just like working my way through the classroom. Couldn't compete. Ended up running track just to keep myself competitive. And from there, got recruited a little bit by Oregon as well. But yeah, dude, I had to fight my way back and start putting education first.
When you were younger, right, and you were going through, because I remember your brother talking about how like you would just be in the backyard just doing like broad jumps, plyometrics, like you just always were just a hardworking dude when it came to your physical abilities, and living with you for the over a year, however how long it ended up being, I could definitely attest to that. Like we would go hard. We'd be going 2 times a day a bunch of times, and then there'd be days where you would wake up in the mornings even beforehand and would be outside doing like plyometrics and stuff. So you like come in and I'd just be getting up and you'd be dead sweat and taking a shower, and then we would go and start the day from there and would still work out twice. And so that work ethic has always been there. And when it comes to speed development, right, and your ability to get faster and get more powerful, how much of that do you feel like is genetic? How much of that do you feel like was part of your workout regimen?
I don't want to overstep my knowledge boundaries here, but from an intuitive standpoint, if you're asking me from experience, I think a large component of, at least if we're talking about football speed, 40 speed is trainable. I think there's a certain percentage that is very trainable because it comes down to stride frequency and how much power you produce. So length and frequency is speed. And if you can get an athlete to produce more stride frequency and keep the stride length the same, they're going to get faster. So it's just an equation that you have to run. And yes, there is a genetic code that will set a 4.4 person different from a 4.3 person. There's a certain genetic component that like that 4.4 person, just you need a certain genetic element to run that like elite time. But in terms of like the above average times, like 4.4, I think that a lot of that is trainable. You need to understand the principles of running. And a lot of that comes from the track and field world and understanding the importance of how to run. You don't just go out there and try to run as fast as you can. It doesn't work like that. There is an actual science that has been proven to how your athlete is supposed to run, whether it's the 40, the 60, the 100, the 200. There has been research to verify that. And then when I ran track, I learned a lot of that stuff. Is like, wow, there's guys that aren't very fast, football fast. Like if you line them up with me, I can beat them in a race, but they can run a 4.3. Like, how is that possible? Oh, okay, this dude trained at this place and they work on this component of building the 40. They've learned how to run a 40. And essentially learning that my senior year in high school, and this is the empirical facts. My senior year in high school, I ran 4.78. Fact. Hand time, 4.78. I was 148. I was very strong. I trained really hard. My senior year in college, I ran 4.39. I worked very hard, but I just trained better. I trained smarter. So that, to me, a lot of that came from learning how to run and from a track and field standpoint, and then learning how to execute a 40. Any event, any speed event like short sprints is based on how well you can execute your race. So you need to know the technical components and you need to have the proper training in order to do so. I think it's hard to put a percentage, but probably 30-40% is how you train is going to determine what type of time you run, for sure.
Well, and the thing too, at least in my opinion, and I actually just did a video on this. It should have posted about 45 minutes ago or so, because a lot of people talk to me about how, oh yeah, you need to have long legs in order to be fast. Like that's the perfect anatomical thing. If somebody was 6'9", that would be so good to run 100, blah, blah, blah. I went in and looked into all the scientific data, right? Or looked a lot into scientific data. But then I was like, okay, so this is what people that are behind a desk, what their opinions are based off of, right? And then you have Elaine Thompson saying like, yeah, I mean, when I was in middle school, I went to like this thing and like this race, like all my friends in like my local community, I was faster than them. But then I went to like this bigger thing that was like the whole kind of area. She's like, got beat by a bunch of girls. Like I was not fast at all, but I didn't take that as like, I can't do this. Like I've always wanted to work. This is her verbalization, right? It's like, I've always wanted to work hard. I always loved doing track. I always loved running. And so I kept on doing it and I kept on getting better. And I ended up getting a scholarship to high school and I kept on getting better and now 100 meter, 200 meters Olympic champion. And started from being not the fastest girl within her, not even close to the fastest girl, right? And same type of thing with Usain Bolt, right? Like I love his quote where he's like, it took me 4 years to run 9 seconds. Like people quit because they don't get results after 2 months. The point of that is your daughter, you have her doing sports already, right? Running track, playing soccer, doing different things. That has to be part of developing fast twitch muscle to me. We could be here all day and talk about how much fast twitch muscle that Usain Bolt has, and that's why he's this gifted person. But take Josh Stangby at 5 and give him Cheetos and bonbons and Coca-Cola and soda and all that, and make him sit down and watch TV all day and give him video games and don't put him in any sports, don't have him do anything athletic, and then have the Josh Stangby that we know that ran 4.39 that has unbelievable power, unbelievable. It can jump out of the freaking building, acceleration, top speed, everything, right? Like that Josh Stangby was built at 5 years old, from 5 years old, right? Like it wasn't like at 10 you were like, what, I'm gonna start being athletic, right? Or at 15 or whatever, right? Like it was always a part of who you were, is being able to develop your speed in your body. And how much do you feel like that is really what matters? Like how early do you think that it could potentially be developing fast twitch muscles? Like it's got to be, to me, early on.
As soon as you're able to run, I mean, you got to realize that at a young age, we utilize what are called mirror neurons. So like we can mimic, like kids mimic what adults do. They try to do the exact same thing. So if a kid sees dad and mom out there running around, getting it in, doing sprints, kid's going to run around, do some sprints. There's this thing is a marathon. And I think that there's this false perception, especially with social media nowadays, where people can see instant success and they equate Usain's 9.58 to like, man, this guy's just built this way. Like, no, it probably took him 15 years to run 9.58. Let's just be honest. It took him 15 years of dedicated, hard training The dude was a 400-meter runner, by the way. He started off as a 400-meter runner. And basically in the track world, that means is like you're not like a good short sprinter. Like you got good endurance, but you're not fast enough to run the 100. And he worked his butt off over time to get to a point where he could run 9.58. If it wasn't for my dad and my brother, my dad just told me, if you're gonna do something, be the best you can be at it. Point blank and period. And then my brother always like pushing me to say like, let's go outside, let's try this different thing. Here's how you run a slant. This is how Bill Walsh says you run a slant. Do 3 steps and then run in. And I would do that. And then we look up.
Love
we
so
look up.
much.
Yeah, dude, you got to like.
Yeah.
We look up. We went and got jump soles. Freaking 9 years old with jump soles. Okay, this is the right regimen. You got to do these jumps and then run a 40. It's like okay, like it's pretty simple. Like there's been people behind us. If you look back in history, Ben Johnson is a great example, and not the steroids, but just look at his training regimen. Look at how he trained, and his coach, who's like one of the greatest coaches of all time, in my opinion, they just basically developed speed in a systematic way. And it took time. It's going to take years, but you have to believe in the system that you're running. You can't quit just because it doesn't work the first time. Usain Bolt didn't step up on a track the first time ever and run 9.58. He stepped on a track and probably got toasted by a lot of people. You need that though. You need to lose. You need to fail in order to like get yourself to a point where you're like, okay, this is where I need to get better at. I need to work on my stride. My start is bad. So that means that like there's something in my power mechanics or the way that I'm pushing, or maybe my back foot is cycling and I'm spinning my wheels at the start, or I just don't know how to stand the right way. You have to figure those things out, but you have to also be able to look in the mirror, watch your film, and accept what you're not good at and make a change to actually get better at it and be committed to it. Because you can get a new system and it may not work at first, but it may be the greatest system you've never tried yet. But you have to believe in it and be committed to it over time. And then over time, you're going to chisel away and you're going to be that fast, like dynamic athlete. Just like working with you, you got to be committed to this program that you run in order to get those results, because that's what's going to transition you from that 4.7, and you just stick to it for 3 years, 2 years, and that's going to become a 4.5. That's 0.2 of a second. How many people would die for that? There's teams out there in a professional level that'll pay millions of dollars for that. So somebody runs 4.78 as a receiver to 4.5, that's $1 million in the draft. No problem. You got to realize that it's your decisions that you make over time. If you're doing the right things, if you're eating the right stuff, if you're training the right way over time, then you're going to be that elite athlete. But it doesn't come right away. Ronaldo wasn't the elite athlete right away. He had to work. And that's why I think he's the greatest of all time, in my opinion. He had to work to become that. That wasn't God-given. He had to discipline himself. He had to go after day. You hear stories, this dude was incredible. He would practice training and then stay after for 2 hours and practice his shots because he had a powerful foot but couldn't aim the ball. I mean, it's just that dedication, man. You got to have it to the right system, though.
I couldn't agree more. And I do think that a lot of times people end up the best, right? The guys that are able to sustain themselves for the longest period of time, a lot of them had that dedication from a young age, and that's what makes it so they are who they are. You see people come and go that have a lot of the talent, the people that really put in the hours and the passion and the consistency, then it's just different. It's a different product that ends up being created. So quick question here. Okay. Track speed compared to football speed.
So like football speed is tied to angles. So there can be somebody that runs a 4.7, but if you can set the right angle and how to like set people up to keep them flat-footed, you can run by them. So you're not necessarily have to be fast to be football fast. You just need to know how to set your angles to be fast in football. So you don't know how to run very well. That's why Jarvis Landry can play and score a lot of touchdowns. He ran a 4.8. Jerry Rice ran a 4.6 and is the greatest football player of all time.
I almost feel like too with Jerry Rice, because people say that to me all the time with like Jerry Rice, but especially at that time, where did he go to college? Like Middle Tennessee or some
Mississippi Valley.
Yeah, Mississippi Valley. Yeah. So he definitely did not get very good 40-yard dash instruction, probably would be my guess, right? So his probably first 10 was not great.
Horrible.
Yeah. And then his last 30 was probably excellent. It was probably
Phenomenal.
top level, right? And so if somebody got a hold of him and was able to work on his first 10, he probably would have been able to run low 4.4 based off of watching his film, right? Like he was separating from people easily, right? But that goes back into kind of what I think you're saying here, where it's like football speed is different because like when it comes to the 40 in some senses, yeah, it's not track speed, obviously, because you don't run track or there's no track events at the 40-yard dash. But the training and the preparation and how you look at how you run the 40-yard dash is more similar to what you do when it comes to running track and field, right? And how you're preparing for track and field than what it is that you do for football. Like there's never a time at football practice where you're doing stuff that's like really going to get us ready for the 40-yard dash because this week, this week when we play the Jets or when we play this high school team, like we need to be able to have some great 40-yard dashes. So let's get a 3-point stance for receivers.
We never did football workouts. We never did any football workouts and training for the combine. Everything was track oriented. So all our workouts were built on building track mechanics and disciplines to increase stride frequency and stride length to make it so you get faster. It's an equation and you need to learn how to execute your race. So it's different from football speed, and you cannot go out there and do football training and expect to run a good 40. It's not going to happen. You can run as many football drills you want in the world, but you're still going to run slow if you're not doing the right stuff. Yeah. So I would agree with you. Like that's the difference between like a Tyreek Hill and everybody else. Like look at this dude, 4.2, whatever, 4.26. Chris Johnson, 4.24. Like the dude dominated the game because of his track speed. Charles, who's the running back from the Chiefs, Jamal Charles, sorry. Like that ability, every team in the world wants that, but that's not football speed. That is track speed. If you ask a scout, number one thing you want, 40. Number one thing from a skill guy, I want a guy who can run a fast 40. And the only way to achieve that is through like training track speed. So I think that's a huge thing.
Where do you think that people mess up when it comes to developing their speed? When you've worked with people, or even maybe some mistakes you feel like you've made when it comes to developing your speed?
I just thought that like going out and running hard, like I'm gonna go out and do 10 sprints. I'm gonna go out and lift a bunch of weights. Like I'm gonna go do football drills. And I thought that like by just running and going out there and trying my hardest, like that was gonna get me faster. And it's just not. You're going to hit a ceiling very early if you're not training the right way. And meaning training the right way is basically following a system that's backed by some scientific principles and somebody who understands the track and field world. So it's doing the right stuff and being with the right people. Save you time.
I love that. In ways like connects to me because I tell people that you don't sprint enough, right? But that there's also part of it that I feel like people will spend too much time watching YouTube videos or being on Instagram or whatever and not spend enough time training. Like you got to get out there and train. But I do like that take as well, where it's like when you are training, and I know this 100% because for me, I mean, I have like a free lap system. With the free lap, I ran 4.58. I've gotten hand time to low 4. This was back when COVID just kind of got started. I know from my own testimonial, learning how to be able to run was the biggest change that I ever had in terms of overall performance, right? Like when we played, I mean, I wasn't slow by any means. Like I was okay with my speed, but it's like, I didn't have good mechanics. Like I just had good turnover. Like I just moved my legs really fast. And I think that's probably because I had like a strong core. I've always had a pretty strong core. Like my dad had me start doing wheelbarrows where he would hold my legs and I would be like wheelbarrow through the house. Like I just loved doing that when I was a kid. So I'd be like, wheelbarrow down, wheelbarrow. Be like, all right, cool. Like I'd grab my feet and I'd just be like walking through the house, walking through the house. And I thought it was great. And he probably loved it too because like, by the time I was done and stopped, I'd be like, okay, like I can't do it anymore. My arms are done. And he's like, all right, cool. Like, that's good. And I was like upset. Like I was like, man, I want to keep going, but I can't handle it. But no, anyway, the point that I was trying to make is that when I started to really understand it, really it was the start, right? Like first 3 steps. How good are you at with your first 3 steps? And then from there, step 3 to 10, right? Because especially people that are naturally fast, like that are naturally fast understand how to get to their top speed in whatever their system of being able to do it is currently, right? You can, whether you're running and just starting from like a 2-point stance, a running back, a defensive back, a soccer player, baseball player, blah, 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 right? Anybody understands how to get to their top speed, right? But what separates these track guys from just the average whatever person that is able to run fast is how quickly do they get to their top speed, and what is the strategy of how did they get there, right? So you take somebody that has top speed, that's great, whatever, right? But if you take another guy that also has great top speed, but understands how to get there and how to get there faster and how to get there in the right position to be able to make it so they can sustain it for a longer period of time, then that person is beating you 10 out of 10 times, right?
Exactly.
And twice on Sunday, right?
Exactly.
And so when you can really get into the specifics of how are you getting to your top speed, now you could start to get better at achieving that top speed, right?
Exactly.
And then that's when you can actually improve your speed. But until you can actually understand the beginning parts of it, you're really, even if you get faster, right, you're still going to end up missing at the beginning. And I mean, I don't have a ton of track background, but I know that especially some of the best guys, right? Like, I mean, talking about now with like the Marcel Jacobs or Trayvon Bromell or whatever, Fred Curley, right?
Bromell, I mean, like, look at his 60. I mean, like, the dude is the best starter in the world. And then like compare him to like Asafa Powell. Like in any sport, your ability to accelerate is the most important thing, because that's going to set you up for a good run. If your acceleration sucks, if your start sucks, the rest of your run's going to suck, because mechanically you're setting your body up in a poor position from the start. And it all comes down to, you're right, like your first couple of steps. How are you getting out there? How are you transitioning from that point to your top speed? And if you don't understand those things about yourself, then you're never going to run your fastest time. You're always going to run slow and you're always going to be frustrated, but you have to understand how to accelerate first, because your 10-yard split is a key to your 40. Your 10-meter split, they always talk about in track, your 10-meter split, a key to your 100. Like if you can't get a good 10, you can't get a good 100. If you can't get a good 10 in your 40, you're not going to run a good 40. Yeah. So it's just like, if you don't understand how to get out of them blocks, you don't understand how to get out of your stance, like you're done.
And that's what happens with like DK Metcalf, right? So what happens, and I've had this happen to me as well, is you start, right? You're all pumped up, right? You have your thoughts of how your race is going to go. And then you're at 10 meters and it's not the way that you thought it was going to be. So what do you do? Especially if you are a amateur, right? Especially if you're younger, especially if this is one of your first 50 races, right? Which is amateur status, at least 50 races, if not maybe even, because even like Abby Steiner, right? Like somebody has a lot of press going on right now. Like she's an amateur, even though she's run a bunch of times, like at the end of the day, like she hasn't ran near as many times as Elaine Thompson, right? So I'm taking Elaine Thompson in the World Championships every day, because to me, what Elaine Thompson has just been preparing this whole time to be able to run great at the World Championships, where Abby Steiner has been trying to run a great 200 for the SEC Championships, the USA Track and Field Championships, right? And now she's gonna have to try to run an even better one here, and she might even already hit her peak for the season, where Elaine Thompson, Shelly Ann Fraser-Price are not at their peaks, 100% guaranteed, because they're veterans, right? And so what happens is you get out and it's not going the way you expected to go, and you start running shitty, right? Or you start running incorrectly. You don't have good technique. You don't have the same technique. You realize, I'm behind, I need to get to my top end speed fast. And you start losing horizontal force and doing the things that are necessary to be able to get to a great top speed, which makes the whole thing just go and not be the expectations that end up happening.
You hit the nail on the head. No doubt.
And I wanted to be able to real quick to transition into the NFL, right? So, because you talked about it a little bit, right? Go backtrack a little bit into the NFL, because I thought it was great. Talk about high school, right? Montclair Prep High School, what it took to be a great high school player or college player, and what it takes to be a great NFL player. What's the difference? Because everybody as you were in that case as well, believes that they are the next whoever it is, quarterback wise, running back wise, receiver wise, defensive back wise, right? And so what is the actual preparation when it comes to the NFL?
That's a great question.
What I'm trying to say here.
Like, no. And here's just to differentiate. So in high school level, you're building your baseline, your general strength. You're building who you are, the foundation as an athlete. When you get to the college level, now you're building your fundamentals. Like you have your fundamentals set in place. High school, you're physically just building yourself to a point where you can compete at elite level physically. When you get to college, now you need to build yourself psychologically to prepare like a pro player. So you need to understand playbook, understand how to study, understand how to take care of your body, because you're not a baby anymore like you are in high school. Nobody's going to baby you. When it comes to the NFL, deliberate practice is what makes you great. So it depends on how many hours you're going to spend on your craft and what are you going to do in those hours. Those are the two key determinants on what make NFL players, or great players. They spend more hours doing what they do, and they spend their hours doing the right things. That's the number one thing. What are the right things? It's different for every position or every field. However, you need to understand yourself as a player and know what your weaknesses are, and you have to be able to eliminate your weaknesses in your game and highlight your strengths in your game. So the only way you can do that is by training properly, eating properly, stretching, all that stuff, the physical preparation. There's a mental preparation phase. There's goal setting, there's development, there's studying film, there's working with experts, coaches, there's training with experts, other athletes. Like you need to surround yourself with greatness. And then amongst that, in the professional realm, being in the NFL, the key thing is will be my number 3, is just staying true to who you are. When they signed Josh Stangby, they signed me to be me. They don't sign me to be T.Y. Hilton. And I had to learn that my rookie year. That was my best learning experiences. I had to learn. I was looking at T.Y. I'm like, man, this guy's great. I would study his film, and I was studying his film more than I was studying my own film my rookie year. In my rookie year, I went out. I was dominating in practice. Like there wasn't a player out there who could guard me, who could stick me, but I spent more time studying somebody else than I did myself. I think the great players study themselves. They watch themselves play film. They watch their bad moments, and they learn how to eliminate the bad from their game and then highlight the good stuff in their game. So when Tom Brady throws a pick, he looks at his film and says, damn, why did I throw this? Okay, like I thought it was this coverage, but it was this coverage. Fixes it. It's done. NFL, you don't have an opportunity to make the same mistake twice.
And from a physical perspective, right, like giftedness wise, things like that, right? Like, I mean, we've all seen guys like Odell and I mean, they're name the person and they all have great physical traits, or I feel like a lot of them do, right? Jalen Ramsey, all those guys. But do you feel like that those physical traits are like there's a lot of guys that have the physical traits and there's not a lot of guys that really understand the professionalism that it takes to play at the NFL level? Or do you feel like some of those guys are just like unbelievably physically gifted and it's just...
No, I like the question. No, I think that there's like tens of thousands of people out there that can be an NFL football player, physically speaking. Every year, there's 4,000 people that enter the draft portal and want to be a pro player. There's tons of guys out there that physically can do it. But there's a level of like maturity from a professional standpoint. This is a business. You need to carry yourself like a business. You are your own entity. So you need to learn how your brand works. You need to learn how to work with other people, how to be a team player, how to commit, how to understand core values of the team that you're operating on and how you align with those values. You need to learn how to assimilate. You need to learn how to work with other people and all this and collaborate. And all this stuff kind of ties into being a professional player. And then having that aside, like who are you as a person? What are you doing in your game to help your community? What are you doing to benefit your family? What are you doing to give back to the youth? Like those things are a part of being a professional athlete that are mandatory. I think it's a given. You have to have all those things in one package. And I think all the great pros, Jalen Ramsey, all those guys, I guarantee you look close enough into their lives, you're going to see all those boxes are checked. All of them, for sure.
And even bringing up Jalen Ramsey, it kind of goes into another thing. And I don't know how much time you have, but couple more questions.
No, Bob, please do, man. Keep going.
Yeah, so one of the things that stands out with Jalen Ramsey, right? Dude's outspoken. He's a bit of a controversial character, let's put it like that, right?
Yeah.
And I know the Josh Stangby that I love can be a very controversial character himself.
Yeah.
And in ways brought out the controversial character in me that I think a lot of people don't get to see, right? Most people don't get to see, but I know Josh Stangby's got to see it. And so when it comes though to being in those professional rooms, right? We all have those parts of us that are very competitive, right? We don't want to get our egos deteriorated or disrespected or talked to the wrong ways, quote unquote, right? Like however that ends up kind of connecting to you.
Yeah.
But the point is, because I know there's parts of you that had a hard time with some coaching feedback, right? And there'd be times where emotionally it ended up impacting you and to a point where maybe you couldn't even come back from some of the things that you ended up saying or doing or whatever. So 2 questions here. One is when it comes to the NFL, right? Like how important is it for you to be coachable, right? And 2, when it comes to being a highly competitive athlete like yourself and having kind of that systems and or checks and balances that you have inside your own head and having some of those times where you might not have been able to control some of the emotions, how were you able to reel that in, control it, and then be able to make it into a strength?
Yeah, man. I think that you're on a good track here. So the great players, they have a level of they don't get too hot or too cold. They know how to utilize that emotion and turn it into a strength for them. So for me, it just came through a lot of failure, man. I mean, I was a hothead for sure. And in college, I had to learn how to take that energy and that emotion. And instead of like, if something didn't go my way or psychologically, I felt like things weren't happening the way that I foresaw them, I had to learn how to transfer that energy and put it into my training, put it into the field. And even going into the professional level, you're going to receive some very hard feedback and you have to learn how to be coachable. And the only way you can do that is by like looking at things objectively. You got to realize that your coaches are people that have invested tens of thousands of hours. Like these are masters at what they do. All they do is spend time looking at your game to figure out how to make you better. So once you look at it from that perspective, you're like, wow, I got a cheat code right here. I got another person telling me like, dude, if you did this one thing, you could be boom, you could be here. And then once I got past, when I went from Indianapolis and I went to Ottawa from there, that was my biggest turning point. Was I'm like, wow, in Indianapolis, I was coached really hard. And I had to learn how to transfer that into my game and download that into my game. And you look at somebody like Kurt Warner, the Kurt Warner story, he was coached hard. They coached him hard, like screamed at him, blah, 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 like you're doing this wrong, you suck. And he learned how to take that coaching, those coaching points, and he improved his game and ended up being one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. And you look at that and he was just so coachable. He was humble enough and he put himself in a mindset where he could receive that, what some people would think is negative, a coach yelling at me or telling me I'm doing something wrong, and turn it into a positive. You look at Michael Jordan, you look at Kobe Bryant, these guys, they can take coaching points, hard coaching, real coaching, and say, my game needs to improve in this area, and I'm gonna take what you're telling me and transfer that over. So learning how to do that was a huge turning point. And then once I got to Ottawa and playing and for the Red Blacks, that's why I had such a great year in 17, was because I went from the Colts to the Red Blacks. So I went from receiving some amazing coaching. Ryan Chudzinski, who was my OC, coached me hard. He believed in me a lot, coached me really hard, made me into a way better receiver. Then I went to Travis Moore, who was one of the greatest receiving coaches. Alex Rosenblum is the greatest coach I ever had, but Travis Moore coached me hard, and he took my game to an elite level because he was a receiver himself, and he taught me a lot about how to play the game and what I was doing wrong. And I translated that into my game and became an elite level receiver.
And so last question, and I know, I mean, you kind of started a little bit later, I think, with your football process, right? And so maybe you can take this into it with, like, I guess some of the risks that come with playing football when it comes to head injuries and stuff like that. I mean, my dad's obviously a football coach, And I've seen it from a lot of different perspectives. In a lot of senses, to me, when you get into some of the younger ages, right, like you're 12, some of the physicality that I think happens and along with the development of equipment, I don't feel like you're nearly as at risk for having severe head injuries is kind of made it seem out to be, right? Like when you get to the NFL level or those high college levels, like those guys are moving so fast. They've been working out for years, right? Like they're inside of these programs where everything is very, very accounted for when it comes to timing. So, and guys are open or the windows are so small to be able to get a ball into a certain place, or the guys are just so physically gifted. Like that's where you see these crazy hits. When on the lower levels, you don't really see crazy amounts of contact, and really you don't have, a lot of the kids at least, don't have the strength to really be able to put that much physical power onto another person. But with that being said, how impactful has football been on your life? And do you think that when you started was the right time? Do you wish you would have started earlier? How does your kind of take on it all?
I wish I would have started a lot earlier. I think that especially as a kid, it's important to learn. There's a lot of fundamentals you learn from a young age, like in playing tackle football, like how to tackle, how to catch, how to hold a football, how to throw a football, all that with shoulder pads and helmets on that would help you to become a better football player. And with how like technology is changing, the safety of the game is improving every single day from like a scientific standpoint, from an equipment standpoint, and a coaching standpoint. So I think it's extremely safe for kids to play. And even at the professional level, like the technology that they use and then the techniques, like football is actually a really safe game when you look at it, like objectively speaking. You got guys flying around trying to knock each other's heads off, but somehow everybody's okay for the most part. The way they design helmets and shoulder pads, and even the way they practice at a professional level, I would argue there's a counterculture saying football is dangerous. No, I think football is like pretty safe, and the integrity of the game is coached and taught in a safe way. And it's impacting my life in a very positive way. Football is one of the key components as to why, like, I've even succeeded in business, why I've succeeded in life, why I feel I succeeded as a father, because it teaches you this certain level of perseverance and just how to get better as a person, to get through stuff and to take hits and get back up, to deliver hits, to help your team, to sacrifice. All that stuff makes you a better person. So like, I love the sport of football. I love what it's done for my life. Nothing ever negative.
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah.
I
love you, man.
Love you too, bro. I appreciate you coming on, right? That was, I mean, amazing stuff. I appreciate you letting me do the interview. I do enjoy doing these things and being able to kind of interview people and yeah, just learn a little bit more about the story. So appreciate you doing this for me, and I hope the audience ends up really liking and really enjoying. Is there any way, if they want to be able to reach out to you about anything personal when it comes to whatever, speed, playing at the next level, even business, right? Redesigning their house. How do they?
Well, you can just touch base with me on social media. Just hit me up at Josh Stang5 on Instagram. I'm always really receptive on there, especially with like younger athletes. Like if you guys are looking for any sort of advice, I'm always willing to give back, because I wish I would have had that when I was a kid. Obviously, I do own and operate a landscape design business, so I love what I do every day. Like right now, I'm heading out to go see somebody's yard to design a beautiful backyard for somebody. So just reach out to me if you guys ever need anything in regards to some mentorship, or like what should I do? I'm thinking about playing pro ball. I'm always just a direct message me, no problem. I think that you always got to be true with yourself and your journey, and that's the key to your success. Many blessings to everybody on here.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Josh.